questions. Lino is the Chief Executive Officer of Jewish Family Service of Metrowest, JFS. JFS is a community-based 501c3 nonprofit organization serving over 7,500 individuals and families annually within the Metrowest and Greater Boston regions, supporting vulnerable children and families, individuals, immigrants, and older adults aging in place. Lino is a first-generation Mexican-American, having been born and raised in Southern California's migrant agricultural region of the Imperial Valley. He worked with his parents in seasonal agriculture, and one of his very first heroes was Cesar Chavez, whom he met when he was 7 years old, and his legacy of caring for migrant workers has inspired him ever since to fight for those in need. Under Lino's leadership in the last 14 years, he was previously the COO of JFS for 11 years. JFS has accelerated reducing social, academic, and health inequity in community members experiencing financial distress, poverty, and racism and anti-Semitism, especially families with young children and frail, isolated older adults. Lino is passionate about identifying families that have been left behind and providing that needed safety net to allow families to be stable and thrive. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he is especially proud of JFS's work keeping immigrant families from being homeless and providing basic needs to them and helping older adults in the Jewish community stay safe and connected. Individuals served doubled during the peak of the pandemic. JFS during the pandemic provided over 90,000 meals and over 120,000 units of toiletries, sanitary products, learning materials for children, and information in multi-languages to the community. JFS is one of 8 resettlement agencies in the Commonwealth certified by the Federal State Department to resettle refugees, asylum seekers, and other migrant families. Before joining JFS, Lino served in the U.S. Navy for 22 years as a naval officer. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy with a BS in Systems Engineering and holds a Master's of Science degree in Civil Engineering, Environmental Concentration from the University of Massachusetts and a Master's of Business Administration from Babson College. He serves on the boards of the Metrowest Health Foundation, the Greater Boston Veterans Collaborative, and Framingham State University. He lives with his wife, Kathy, in Framingham, and has a son, David, who has a Master's of Education. He is a Master's of Education candidate at Clark University, and a daughter, Molly, who is a physical ed teacher here in Framingham at Framingham High School. Speaking this morning on JFS's work with refugees, please give a warm Brotherhood welcome to Lino Covarrubias.
Well, good morning. I guess Stuart didn't give you the short version of the bio. I gave him 2.
This is the better.
He's your buddy. Well, it's really a pleasure for me to be here to present this morning. This is our temple, as was said today, a long generation of membership here at Temple Beth. So again, it's really an honor for me to be here this morning. And thank you for coming out on a cold, rainy, not so cold, but definitely a rainy morning. I really appreciate that. And I have a very small presentation. I promise I will not, won't be deaf by PowerPoint this morning. But I do have some information that I do want to share before. The most important part is your questions. And as Steve mentioned, we do a lot at JFS, and I'll cover a little bit about, in general, what we do, and then really focus on the work of resettling refugees, asylum seekers, etc. This is what I'm going to talk about today, refugees, particularly Ukrainians, Israelis, and asylum seekers locally. But I'm going to start with giving you a national picture, because I know you've heard a lot on the news of what's happening on the border. What are the numbers? What is truly numbers? And I'm sure you'll have some questions afterwards. Selfish plug before we start. Yes, I think it was all covered today. I think with our mission at JFS, our motto that no one family be left behind. That's really what we think about every day. With everything we have to do, it's like we want to make sure not one family be left behind. I know, tall order. Not to be confused with our friends in Boston, Jewish Family and Children's Service, JFNCS. A lot of people go, oh yeah, you guys are in Boston. They're a different organization. We do collaborate. But really, we have different missions in that respect. And they're really Boston-based, North Shore, South Shore, and we're pretty much Metro West is our service area. This was covered already. We serve 7,500 a year and growing. 3 areas of concentration that was mentioned in the bio. Yes, of course, we work with Jewish families, particularly those that have some sort of financial distress. We definitely work. The growing area is older adults. That is an area of major work. And of course, we do a lot of work with immigrants. And we also work on different fighting hate and anti-Semitism initiatives. You may have heard of, we have a program called Active Bystander Training, that we train the community in general on how to be an active bystander, how to say something or do something. And we've been doing a lot of work in the schools because we really think that's where all the work of fighting hate and anti-Semitism has to really start in the school system. We just opened a social innovation center, and the whole purpose of the social innovation center is to take all these great little nonprofits that we work with and really together be better organizations so we can have better impact. There's some great organizations. You probably know of them, but they're great at the tactical work, but from a strategic standpoint, they need help. And this is the whole purpose of the Social Innovation Center. Was established in memory of Sue Copeland, who was a temple congregant here. So we're very excited to have opened that center in her memory. We're a medium-sized nonprofit, $6 million budget. 20% is from government. Most people go, whoa, where's the other come from? Philanthropy, right? From donations from wonderful individuals like yourself, and thank you. So we're always raising money to be able to do the work that we need to do. Certainly, we're trying to grow the amount of work we do that government pays. And we are big believers that government should take care of our citizens, but there's a lot of gaps, and that's what we normally, what the social nonprofits do is fill those gaps. 75 employees and growing. We have 250 active volunteers. And that is no kidding, the 250 active volunteers. Without volunteers, we couldn't execute on all the different facets of our work. Founded in 1979, this is really going to lead into my discussion about refugees, right? We were established in 79. Next year is our 45th anniversary. And major growth in the 80s and 90s, particularly when we started resettling Russian families Russian Jewish families from the former Soviet Union. How many of you were involved with that project? I know my mother-in-law, Ellie, right? So that was a big effort, Susan. That was a big effort of the Jewish community in the greater Boston. And Worcester and Metro West, we had a lot of manufacturing. That's really what made JFS grow, resettling those families. And over the years, we've really, based on all that work, is really part of our DNA, we've established an expertise in refugees. And what you'll hopefully learn from my presentation today, refugees, when I say a refugee, refugees are from the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. Right. I know we tend to say anyone that's coming to our shores and needs help, we call them a refugee. Officially, a refugee is through that program. And what's great about those refugees, as I will talk later, they already come with green cards, so they can start working right away. It's an easy pathway process for refugees, not so for the other groups that I'll talk about. National picture on what you've heard about immigration. This is this year, right? October. This is fiscal year. These are government numbers from October of 2022 to the end of this fiscal year, which is September 30 of 2023. There was 2.5 million encounters, and what that means, when people come to the United States, they come through ports of entry, which are, of course, borders, the airports, and also seaports. A lot of people don't think of seaports, but those are areas where we do have people coming in. And as you've heard on the news, particularly this past year, there was a lot of misinformation and people were crossing without authorization, right? And that was approximately 800,000 they call apprehensions, right? It was about 30% of all the entries coming in to the United States. And I think when you hear the news, they say, oh, everybody coming into the United States is not authorized or, quote, illegal. That's not true. It's 30%, still pretty high. But what this graph shows, the top blue line has really shown the fluctuation of people crossing without authorization, and mostly, of course, on the U.S.-Mexican border. The bottom line, the red pink line, shows that this is starting to grow. That's because asylum seekers, and I'll talk about asylum seekers, finally understand that, wait in line through this app process, so that you're processed correctly. And the word is out that even if you're authorized to seek asylum in the United States and you cross illegally, that will nullify your ability to do so. So that's why you saw a huge drop here towards the end of this year. The orange line went up, but overall, the amount of unauthorized crossings are back up. And what's interesting about the situation with immigration in the United States, right? We need immigrants in our country for workforce. Overall, the U.S. is at 3.5% unemployment, right? Lowest in 54 years, right? In Massachusetts, it's 2.5%, even lower. And basically the reason for this is, you can see this U.S. annual population growth. The rate of growth has been dropping. China saw this many years ago, right? And they totally abated their different birth control rules that they had in place. They're keeping all their people in the country. We had an adoption program at JFS, and many of those babies came from China. That's closed, right? China does not any longer do international adoptions, because they see this decline, and they know they're going to run out of people to work. And as big as a country as China is, this is why we're having all these workforce shortages. And right now in the U.S. is 9.6 million jobs open. Large percentage in the service industry, healthcare, restaurants, all those different service providers. And it's a similar trend here in Massachusetts. Just to give you an idea about refugee arrivals, this is also from the NPI. This is information from the government. This shows from 1980s to present, 2023, right? We used to take over 250,000 refugees back before the 80s. Then we had a major drop, and the orange line, the blue line, is what the president authorizes every year. This is one of those things where you look at what a president can authorize, and Congress funds if they want. The president every year sets the annual ceiling of how many refugees. Now these are refugees from the High Commission, right? And the orange is how well we do as organizations trying to fill those requirements. Overall, the reason I showed you this, again, the trend of refugees coming to the United States has been drastically falling over the years. And of the 2.5 million that I talked from this year that came to the U.S. in different ways, only 2.5% were refugees, right? Very, very low number. It was 60,000. And and again, like I mentioned, refugees already come here with an excellent pathway. I can tell you, maybe you were involved 7-8 years ago with the Syrian families we brought to Metrowest. They are doing fantastic. They are living off the economy. Even the family who was a goat herder and didn't know any English now is very proficient in English and has all these different skills. The refugee program works. They come with funds, training, pathways. It's these other programs that I'll talk about that there's challenges. So what's happening in Massachusetts? Also, an overall picture of Massachusetts. There are approximately 1.3 million immigrants in Massachusetts, so about 18% of our population is immigrant. And I'm not talking about immigrants that came many, many generations ago. These are immigrants that have come in within the last 2 to 3 years, right? So we constantly have many immigrants coming into our Commonwealth. This gives you an idea of the percentage of where different cultural groups come from. You see Brazil, 5.7%. A large percentage of that 5.7 is right here in Framingham, and also Hudson, Marlborough, and Milford. Of that, this question comes up: what percentage of the immigrants in the Commonwealth are undocumented? It's about the same as the percentage for the rest of the country. It's about 20 to 22%. Let's talk about what's happening here locally. Basically, four major groups we've been doing a lot of work in the past few years. I'll start with the Afghans, right? We had a major evacuation of Afghanistan. Most of them came to the United States. Europe was like, that's a U.S. problem. You take them, right? And the president did so. So we accepted 90,000 into the U.S. All came in under what's called humanitarian parolee status, not refugees, right? Now, this is a status that allows you within 2 years, right, to either shelter in place or figure out a pathway that's available. It could be asylum, right? It could be what's called TPS, temporary protective status. And there's, of course, all these different visa that if a company wants to hire you, you can end up with an H-1B, for example. There's so many different ways to get a visa and stay in the United States. Here in Massachusetts, we resettled, and we say we, there's as Steve said, we're one of 8 resettlement agencies. So 8 resettlement agencies in the Commonwealth resettle about 2,500 in Massachusetts, individuals. In the Metrowest, we're about 350. Most of the Afghans, of course, did not know anyone in the area. How we were able to house them, because even though the humanitarian parolee has access to work authorization, right? The cost of living is very high, right? Housing. So we worked on a sponsorship model with many synagogues and churches to be able to help the families, get going. And all those families, JFS, we resettled 10 of those Afghan families. They're doing great, right? There's plenty of work. As long as we help them get housing, get them going. As far as work, there's plenty of work. It's just a matter of getting them started. Most of the Afghans right now, their only pathway is asylum, which, as some of you may know, you have 2 years to petition the federal courts for asylum. It's not a great pathway, because the onus is on the individual or the families to prove, right, that they were basically fleeing from state-sponsored terrorism, violence, etc. And that's the key word, state-sponsored, right? So many people who come here from Central America, let's say there's drug gangs, right, and are asking for asylum, they have to prove that those gangs are being state-sponsored to get approval from the federal courts. It's a very high bar, and we were hoping for the Afghans that the Congress would pass the Afghan Adjustment Act, the AAA, which would give the privileges of refugees to the Afghans. Because obviously, we will not be sending Afghans back to Afghanistan if they do not qualify for asylum, right? So I think eventually we'll get there, but that's, we're in an election year cycle now, so we'll see. So those Afghans. Ukrainians also came in. These are the Ukrainian war refugees, right? We had a lot of moms with kids coming here because of what was and is still going on in Ukraine. And they also came in on what's called humanitarian parolee status, which, again, is 2 years shelter in place. Right now, their pathway is they need to go home after 2 years. Ukraine is not one of those countries that's set up for asylum at this point. In the country, we so far 271,000 Ukrainians have come here to shelter in place, and 120 of those was through. You heard this. United for Ukraine was a program that Biden administration set up, saying, we want to bring in 100,000. Well, we quickly went over that. Massachusetts, 5,000 have come to Massachusetts, and here in Metrowest, 250. Probably over half of them had some sort of family member or friend in the area, so they're, in their living quarters could be an additional bedroom, it could be a basement. Israelis, right? As soon as October 7th happened, and terrible things, particularly when everybody's being mobilized and the reservists were being mobilized, we started to see a lot of moms with kids coming to the Boston area, right? The initial wave was people who already had some connection in the Boston area, friend, family, and many had dual citizenship. Then we saw another wave of those who did not have dual citizenship and did not have a travel visa. So what the president did, which interestingly you really didn't hear in the news, we just all of a sudden we knew there was resettlement agencies because we're doing this work, that there was a travel visa waiver for Israelis. And what that meant that if you had a current passport, you could travel to the United States and stay in the U.S. for 90 days. So we thought we were going to have a lot of families coming in. So we immediately knew, some of you might have seen our email, started recruiting families to do home hospitality. And we quickly, over 90 families throughout greater Boston Metrowest said, yes, we'll take an Israeli family, and in particular they have children. So, but those wanting that arrangement just was a small trickle. And by the way, it wasn't just Jewish Israelis, also Arab Israelis, right? Because particularly in the north, where a lot of the Hezbollah action is happening, those communities are very mixed, right, with Jewish and Arab communities, and so they're also in the fire line. So they also wanted to get out of Israel with their kids, and just to little shelter in place. But again, we think that the reason why we didn't have the huge numbers is this travel visa waiver is very restrictive, in that basically you cannot change your status. And so if some company saw you and you wanted to go work and you're on this way, you literally have to leave the country and go to a U.S. embassy or consulate to get your visa and come back. So. And the folks that we have worked, come here for a month and a half, they want to go back. So they're like, we want to go back because there's really not much they can do. They cannot work. They can't drive. No, they don't have a license to drive. So most of them we've seen come here, have changed their tickets earlier, because most have through January to stay here, have decided that they want to go back early. So the numbers have been pretty small, about 90 families that have had a match throughout greater Boston. Here are the big numbers, right? And this is why we're in a state of emergency right now in Massachusetts. It's the asylum seekers, mostly Haitians, right? So far in Massachusetts, right, as you've heard of the news, our emergency shelter system has been completely saturated because of the new arrivals. Just too many, too fast. What's interesting about these Haitian families, they're not coming from Haiti. They're coming from Brazil and from Chile. And they had been there for 2 to 3 years. So the kids speak Portuguese and Spanish. So it's actually been interesting how we communicate with them, because initially I did not have French Creole speaking staff. Now I do. But we were able to communicate with the kids through the Spanish and Portuguese, since we have large language capacity in that area. Many of them left, they say racism, they're black, so particularly in Chile, they liked that they were workers, but they just kids in schools, there was a lot of racism. And then particularly in Brazil, right, they were being threatened of being returned to Haiti, because Brazil does not have an asylum program. So it was like, where do we go? So, and this is the answer, and I call it, why so many so fast to Massachusetts? First was also, you remember there was on the U.S.-Mexican border, there was total chaos, right, 2 years ago. There was just, people didn't know where to stay, or there was just chaos. And finally, border enforcement got their act together and said, aha, well, let's use technology. So there's something you hear, it's called a CBP1 app. So asylum seekers can actually put all their information in a smartphone and then basically apply electronically, and they're waiting in line. So now they'll get a text or a WhatsApp, and they say, your appointment is in a week. and the whole family. So it's a better oiled machine now as far as processing. The problem is all the infrastructure to deal with that sort of volume coming into the U.S. Of course, is not in place. And then why here, Massachusetts? Well, certainly, Massachusetts have right to shelter state, meaning there's a requirement that the state provide shelter. And also, Boston has over 55,000 Haitians living in the greater Boston area. So there's a large Haitian community in the area. So everybody's like, let's go to Boston. We have either family members or somebody that we know up there. And therefore, that's why we've seen so many large numbers coming here in Massachusetts. In particular, this one app that's really made it much more efficient to process people. Certainly, it's really overwhelmed our state, our shelter system, and also barriers of work authorization, 3 to 11 months. Anything dealing with immigration law is federal law. Therefore, work authorization that's tied to immigration status is also federal. Require processing. So all these offices that do work authorization are also overwhelmed, overstaffed, understaffed, and that's the delay. Because, like I said, there's plenty of jobs in Massachusetts. It's just getting that work authorization, as you hear, and everybody's trying to accelerate that. But in the end, they still have to be processed, right? And here in Massachusetts, 230,000 open jobs, many in the service industry. Solutions and concerns for the future, and I'll finish up so we can have some Q&A. Home share program. We've started a home share program, JFS, in the city of Framingham with the senior center, Callahan Center. It's a pilot. Our pilot right now is one, we call it the Golden Girls, where people are moving into our project is people moving in together, sharing costs and the like. But we also see where this whole notion of immigrant families possibly moving in with an older adult. In particular, we have quite a few older adults throughout Metrowest that are living by themselves and need services, but back to the situation where we can't get them services because there's not enough workers. So imagine we move an immigrant family in with that older adult. There's an arrangement. We're involved, making sure everything is moving appropriately to be able to first house those immigrants and also take care of that older adult. So those are all creative things. Of course, the real solution for housing is more structures, and that's going to take at least a decade, probably or more, to get to the level where we need to be. And of course, you've heard office building conversion to housing in Boston. That's something that's being looked at. There's brand new buildings in Boston that were built, and of course, COVID and Zoom. A lot of companies said, I don't have to pay $1 million lease every year. I'm not going to jump on that. So there's a lot of empty space in Boston, but it has to be converted. Some concerns, as you heard, that the governor set a limit at the number of families that can go into shelter, and that's 7,600 families. So then the rest are being triaged. They're trying to set up some overflow setups, in particular with faith organizations. There's a fund, and I'll talk about that. There's a fund set up for having organizations, faith organizations, house people temporarily. And faith organizations do not have to, they can waive the occupancy requirements of municipalities. Of course, federal funding for existing shelters, the governor is waiting for federal funding. It hasn't come yet. And right now, as you've probably seen, there is a supplemental budget for $250 million to continue to support this type of work. I said something to note that's really important, that if this supplemental is not approved, right, we still have the state of shelter requirement. What happens in that case, then either they go into the rainy day fund, or they go and they start looking at earmarks. So many organizations like JFS, we have earmarks that should be part of the budget line, but it gets very tough to get an earmark on the budget. But we have a large earmark where we take care of older adults in community. those funds could be in jeopardy. So we think that those supplemental funds will be approved, but we'll see. Definitely, my call to action today is you can definitely donate to our work. You saw that 80% of our work is philanthropy. Encourage community to help immigrants, especially faith organizations. You may be asked by a church, "Hey, are you guys doing this or whatever?" We're encouraging faith organizations to move forward if they can, and certainly JFS would help consult, right? But the issue is one of capacity, where to house people. Again, the whole issue of there's job openings that we need filled in the Commonwealth. Home share to help vulnerable older adults. If you are somebody who has a house and is interested in a home share arrangement, please see me afterwards. Obviously, federal funding. We keep pushing our Congress and senators for the funds. The asylum seekers are coming here, right? The issue is a federal issue, yet there's so far no funds for us to be able to respond to this. In the end, for us at JFS, no matter what's happening, we think of the people we're helping. And in particular, our notion that we've all been strangers in a strange land really focuses our work. Thank you. Plenty of time.
Thank you for coming. It was very informational. A couple of questions. You said there were 2.5 million encounters. How does that, when you listen to the news, it's certainly many more immigrants that are coming into the country. So how do you what does the 2.5 million represent? Those who came in legitimately?
No. So the 2.5 million those are all federal statistics. So is those that came in and actually registered. So there's some encounters, I know, that as soon as they're caught at the border, they're returned. They're not arrested or processed. Basically, they're turned around. They don't count those as encounters. And more, that is, I know, happening in the U.S.-Mexican border, where they're crossing the river, and they just take them to the bridge, and there's no processing. There's no. So the 2.5 million encounters are actually names in the system.
So they're legal.
No. So 2.5 million encounters. And then 30%, that was the 800 apprehensions.
Right.
Normally, if you get apprehended, it's because you came in without authorization. So 30% of those 2.5 million were without authorization.
Okay.
I'm curious about something. No, you can't. You talked about healthcare workers being needed. My friend who's a nurse and in charge of nurses, there were 250 nurses that were let go last week. I'm curious about why we have all these open roles for nurses when the 250 and they're mobile nurses.
Where did they get laid off? We get them hired.
I don't know the name of the program. She's in charge of the program.
Yeah, who knows, maybe whether it was a defunct medical system. These open positions for immigrants, I'm talking janitorial services, food service, not those,
But you talked about healthcare.
Yes, so this is something that, Mass General, for example, most of the time, 30% of their ER bays are closed because they don't have enough janitors to clean them. When they have an emergency, right, and they use those, they need to be properly cleaned. There's not enough janitorial personnel. So normally, even if that hospital is the closest to where you should go, they may reroute somebody because they don't have the capacity.
These are mobile nurses. So these nurses that go in.
Travel nurses. Yeah, the travel nurses, that's, well, I can tell you this, they're going to get rehired real quick. That's not a problem. But yeah, what I'm talking about, these entry-level jobs immigrants will fill, are those really low-skill jobs that absolutely need to be in place to be able to, these health providers have be at full capacity to provide care.
Thank you very much for coming. Quick question. I know you take government money, so 20% of your budget has to be directed to basically non-sectarian type issues. Would I be correct in saying that?
That's correct.
Okay, so if I was going to make a donation to you and I wanted it directed to Jewish-oriented issues, so
Yes.
Jewish people, Israeli Jews,
Yes.
not Afghanistan Jews, if there are too many, I don't think so, not
Not
Haitian,
too many of them.
not too many Haitian Jews, correct?
Correct.
So if I didn't want my funding spent on non-Jewish issues, do you have a program where you can specifically direct the funding to Jewish-only issues?
Yes, absolutely. If you go into our website, a donation, we have over 25 categories. You'll see there's one for Jewish assistance. We have one particularly Israeli war refugee evacuees. You can direct your funding, and we're very much have to use when funds are restricted. We have to use them for that cause, and we get audited every year, and that's where they spend most of the time. Federal or state funding and restriction on donations. So, good question. Thank you.
Hi, Lino. Thank you very much for coming. Aside from looking for housing, are there other things that people could do to help JFS in this quest?
Yeah, actually, Temple Beth Am is right now doing a clothing drive, winter clothing drive, and so thank you. We basically, we have a huge need for volunteers. In particular, if you're retired, we love retirees because you have a little bit of time during your day. And most of our work is during the normal, working day. So volunteering is important. Of course, donations. We're very much always looking for funds, and also we've had some great luck with different organizations, particularly churches and synagogues, with having initiatives with their students doing gift cards that can help anybody. Right? Does the gift cards go to any family in need? And I have to say that even though my presentation today was specific to refugees, we still do a considerable amount of work in the Jewish community. Right? There is, anytime I speak with some of my colleagues and I mention Jewish poverty, I hear some kind of laughter in the back. But there is such a concept, right, of Jewish poverty. There's poverty in every cultural group, and certainly we're seeing more and more need, particularly with the aging community, for assistance. So volunteering, donating, doing different drives. I'm always open for any ideas because we in the end want to make sure we engage community as well in solving our social problems. Thank you.
Do you provide services to people who are in the programs with DSFS?
Normally, very small numbers of people who are in the Department of. You're talking about the Department of Children's Services?
Yes.
Yeah, we work with the schools very closely, particularly with the Framingham Public Schools. So there's many times where they have a family that needs assistance. So we'll work with the family. And also, if there's a counselor from DCF, we'll work with them. But we don't have a contract, for example, with them.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much again for coming in today. It's a wonderful program you run and getting some clarification on the details and some of the insights of what's actually going on behind the scenes is really interesting. You did mention JCFS downtown.
Yes.
There are a lot of. Can you just explain the relationship between your organization and all of the other Jewish family services organizations that appear to be throughout the nation?
Yes.
I think I've asked you this before, and I never really got a good explanation if there is an umbrella organization or if you're all absolutely, completely independent.
We're like synagogues. We're all independent with our own boards. So there's 143 JFSs throughout the country. Most of them, of course, concentrated along the coast, the Atlantic coast, Pacific coast, and Chicago, Cleveland area, right? Basically where the Jewish community was in the past and still is. And so we do. There is a trade group organization, the National Association of Jewish Family Services Agencies, that but they're really like a trade group. We all have our independent boards and our missions. Certainly with Jewish Family and Children Service, JFNCS, we collaborate. Probably the one mission area of overlap is the work we do helping Jewish families. But they, for example, don't do any of this refugee work. And they, as far as just working with immigrants, mostly only the Russian, Ukrainian, Jewish community.
You mentioned a few opportunities for housing, immigrant housing. One was I think it was the Golden Girls program. Is that what it's called?
The Golden Girls.
Golden Girls.
That's
the other,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, the other was partnering Haitian immigrants or families with an elderly
Yes.
homeowner. Can you talk about specifics for other homeowners to welcome an immigrant family? What requirements for that home, physical requirements, might be needed?
Great question.
Thank you.
So we partner with an organization called Nesterly. They have been doing this work for quite a few years in Boston particularly in Cambridge, with students and older adults that have houses. So students get to rent a room from the older adult. Part of them paying less rent than being out in the economy, they have to, shovel the walk, cut the grass, do chores, right? So Nesterly, they have all the expertise of making sure that the house is correct, making sure it meets the municipality's regulations, right? They also have, the very important part of it is insurance, liability, right? God forbid that there's a fire because somebody's cooking a meal, and who's going to pay, everything has to be done by the book, because there is money being transacted. And and this is something that we work with Framingham, the city of Framingham, because they were concerned about what about tracing of money, what about the legal requirements. So with Nesterly, all that risk is taken off the table, right? So normally, if somebody's interested in this arrangement, the first thing we do is our Nesterly representative reviews the house. They go in there, right? Particularly if it's going to be, there's certain things that you can't waive. For example, if somebody's going to be staying in the basement, there's got to be two forms of egress. So if you don't have a bulkhead where somebody can get out, that's not going to be authorized as a living space, right? So they go through all that stuff. Or you may have a bulkhead that needs some fixing because it's there, but it hasn't been opened in 30 years, right? Somebody's chuckling, right? Is that your bulkhead? But that's where we start. And right now, the project we have going is this project we have quite a few older adults, particularly in Framingham, that have 3 to 4 bedroom home, right? There's nowhere for them to move. Even if they sold that asset, right, that home, there's nowhere for people to move, right? So they have to stay in that home. And of course, we know that those homes normally probably now need two people earning a living to support that home. And we have this old concept after COVID, as you know, that rents went up 25%. So we have older adults that have been renting for quite a few years. Now they're not going to be able to afford their rent. So obviously there's a lot of financial distress. So that's like the first thing that makes it like, of course I don't want somebody living with me, but I have to. But where we come in is to make sure that the match is as good as possible, and then maintaining that match, right? Because we don't want people going there for 2 months and saying, "Oh, it didn't work out, I have to jump somewhere else," because particularly the person who is not going to be able to afford their rent, they're more likely going to be homeless. And remember, the shelter system is full. So where are they going to go, right? So the faster we get ahead of this, and just in Metrowest, there's over 1,000 homes that have a single older adult living in them, 3 to 4 bedroom homes. 1,000. Oh no, question for my mother-in-law.
I wasn't going to say it, but he did. Lino, you're talking about clothing donations. They need to be new clothes or used clothes. What's the status there?
Our focus, there's plenty of organizations that do all types of clothing. What we do is we really focus on the children, the clothing for children. And as far as coats and boots, of course, gently used is great. But as far as everyday clothing, we buy new.
Okay.
Because we don't want them going to school and having worn. It's just not great for them. So
what about toys?
Toys we do not collect. You can thank our insurance carrier and lawyers for that, because toys you have to have the packaging to make sure that they're what the date. Otherwise, it could be a choke hazard. We don't know, and it's a liability. So no toys unless they're brand new and packaged.
Thank you very much. It's very, very interesting. Are there hotels in the area that offer rooms for these people?
Right now, here in Framingham, there are 2 hotels that are housing mostly Haitian asylum seekers. That's been the situation with the emergency shelter system, that it's just your standard shelters, right, like a building that's set up as a shelter. Those were quickly saturated, and then the governor therefore then authorized, because of a shelter state regulations, authorized hotels to be used. So most of the arrivals that have come in are in hotels. What we've done is, particularly we've had some of the asylum seekers who are compromised medically, and they really should be in a 24-hour supervised shelter, right? Well, there's staff there 24 hours. It's a process to do so, because somebody has to move from that shelter to a hotel. But we are able to do that. The question I get asked a lot: when, and where will they go, right? And that's one of the things right now that the governor's trying to figure out. But we really think that those families that are here in Framingham, there's families in Marlborough, Hudson, they're going to be staying in those communities for quite a while. And so those, and actually that worked out for particularly the Framingham Public Schools. They were concerned because these are temporary, right? Emergency shelters are supposed to be temporary. The superintendent hired staff here in Framingham to be able to accommodate more students. But the issue with getting compensated, they have to be on board for X number of months. And he was concerned he was going to hire all these people, and all of a sudden the families are going to move out, and he was going to be stuck with the bill. So in that respect, that didn't happen. So the school district had the capacity to be able to take on more students.
Thanks again. I don't want to take up 2 of the 3, but I've got 2 questions. One very, very quick.
Sure.
Are you paying for the use of the trademark Golden Girls?
No, I haven't gotten a assisted. What is it? Assisted desist. Yeah.
Yeah, cease and desist.
Thank
right.
you. Yeah.
All right.
Cease and desist. Yeah.
The real question is, with limitations on the kind of monies that flow to you and organizations like you, why isn't there more consolidation in your industry, which granted would put people like you out of business, out of a job, but on the other hand, it makes more money available for the end purpose of your organization?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And after COVID, there was quite a bit of that consolidation, because some of the organizations first went way too outside of their mission area to respond, and they basically had to fold. And really comes down to, most of the time, the board of directors. Right, I work for the board of directors. It's not my company that I can do anything with. So it really is up to the board of directors. If they still feel like there's major impact the organization is doing. I can tell you for us, because one of the questions in the past has come up. Why don't you merge with Jeff and CS? Right. Let's keep it really real for a minute. And in fact, when you look at everything that we do and Jeff and CS does, we're completely different mission areas. It would almost be like if Jeff and CS wanted to really bring JFS on under their wing, because we're really about social action. I mean, when you have to raise this much money, that means we're able to move quickly on social action. Jeff and CS, 80% of their budget is third-party insurance. Okay, they do health, health related everything. Basically, I raise 80% of our funds. They raise like 10%, right? So, and also when you're going to consolidate, those two boards would have to say, yeah, we want to consolidate. For us, they look at us and go, we'd have to raise too much money to keep you going. They don't want us, right? Because their model is beautiful. They have third-party insurance. So, but it really, what happens with the social impact organizations, particularly the ones that are really suffering, we're very healthy. We're very healthy, but there's a lot of organizations out there that are not so. And I can tell you, I'm always talking to them and going, "Hey, do you think you'd be interested in?" Because I see, and that was the whole purpose of that social innovation center I talked about. There's so many small nonprofits that do great work, very great work. There's some of them are right here in Framingham, but strategically they have no rudder. They're just kind of helping and they're spinning around. That's an organization that needs a rudder. Whether they can do it on their own through this initiative we're going to have in place, the Social Innovation Center, or is it time for them to really merge with somebody that has that rudder for, again, greater impact? Egos have to be set aside, and that's another issue, right? Egos and the board. But I'm always focused on taking care of people.
My question is on transportation. So if you put, say, an elderly person, obviously there's no car and they don't drive. What if a family lives with somebody, doesn't have a license? So do they drive them around or share a car? Or what do you do if there's no licenses?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's also sort of different solutions. Right now, for example, food, right? Particularly as an older adult that cannot get to food. We've been using DoorDash, Uber. There's different ways to access transportation, and the more and more that we use these different other options, the more availability there is. So normally transportation is a challenge in Metrowest. We have 1,000 square miles because I'm not only working Natick and Framingham. We have what we call the North, Acton, and we call the South all the way down to Franklin. So, but we've been really successful using gig economy transportation setups. And if there's enough volume, then we can go to the MWRTA and say, could you do this for us? As we did with some of the asylum seekers, where there's a hotel, there was not a route, and they've established a route because now they could. It's a business decision. They have to make sure they can make money out of it. And they said, oh, yeah, we can make money out of this.
Thank you very much for a great presentation. My question is about, are there any issues involving the State House and Legislature or in town or city councils in the Metro West area that we should be aware of that will impact your work, either for helping your work or perhaps hindering your work?
Yeah, no, great question. No, I think we have obviously great support from the city of Framingham. I mean, this initiative we started, we actually, I told the mayor that they needed to have a little skin in the game, and they needed to find some money. So they were to find some money to be able to help bankroll the Golden Girls project, home share for older adults. And I presented to the council, and they've been very supportive. And as you know, here in Framingham, they approved the ADU, accessory dwelling units. That was a big move because when it comes to housing, changing any sort of rules, right? It's zoning. Zoning is one of those things that really, depending on how you look at it, may inhibit housing solutions. But the ADU is a big move because now people can actually build a little bump out in the back of son or daughter's home, and then the older parents can live there, right? And that will free up that single family home, right? Some more inventory for some probably more likely young families that can afford a home. And as far as the state, I think the only thing right now at the state and Senate level they're trying to figure the supplement. They're going to approve the supplemental $250 million. They're just trying to figure out how to divvy up that $250 million. How much goes to pay for the hotels? How much gets to really work on what we do well? The resettlement agencies, our arrivals never end up in the shelter system because we're really good at finding housing for people, right? So we've been pushing, and that's going to be in the budget, that there is money for resettlement agents like ourselves to find that housing, to move those people, those asylum seekers out of the shelter system, which is very expensive. It's not cheap. So to house somebody in a hotel, but we have the support that we need. It's I think the big one is, of course, federal funding, and all our federal legislators have been trying to get the president to, but of course it has to go to Congress to get the approval of more funds. So there's a lot of things that have to get to Congress before they think about sending money to Massachusetts, I think.
Okay, thank you again, Lino. Let's give him a round of applause.